Hey everyone, how are you today? Have you had a love affair with bread ever since you were a young child? I have, any kind, any size, any flavor, as has my guest today. In fact, she wrote a book that showcases not only her love of bread, but memories of baking it with loved ones, both before her and after her, and serving it to others in Jesus' name. Hi, I'm Patricia Durgin, and this is Marketers on a Mission. We present marketing tutorials and interviews by and for Christian authors, speakers, and artists. This is episode number 197, How to Promote Your Message and Your Books by Writing Articles with author Karen Whiting. Hello, Karen. How are you?
I'm just great. I hope you're doing well, too.
We are doing well down here in Atlanta. We're not cold, and so that means we're not complaining about the weather. So, with your permission, Mark, highlight you, your life, just for a moment, then we'll get right to the writing. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of words using the word right in some form, but we're all right. Oh, there we go again. You're a mom. You're a grandma. What do you go by? Grandmother? Grandma? Grandma, okay. A widow. You had 38 years with your husband before you passed, living life all over the country and in some different parts of the world, traveling all over the world, always being involved in whatever was going on in the city in which you lived and the church where you resided. You're also a writer and international speaker, which we're going to hear a crazy story here in just a minute about that international speaking, and a writing and marketing coach as well. You've published how many books now?
25.
25, she says so effortlessly. That is amazing. And if I know you, there's more on the way. We may or may not ask that question later. Before we get to your writing, though, let's highlight your speaking. You have a story to share about after your husband passed, you moved to a new city and needed a new professional network that was local and regional to where your new area was. And you prayed a prayer, and the Lord opened a door for you, showing you that He did indeed want you to continue being a speaker. Will you share that story with us?
Sure. Actually, Jim was still alive, and we moved because of his work. And I ended up on the eastern shore of Maryland, and all my connections for speaking seemed to have gotten lost somehow. So I just asked God just before Christmas, we'd been there several months, did He really want me to speak? If it was a pride thing, I didn't want to do it. I only wanted to do it if I could glorify Him. But I said, if you really want me to speak, just have someone that I have not tried to get them to have me speak, that I haven't been sending things to or calling or anything, to ask me to speak. And I was thinking, maybe I'd go as far as Baltimore, Washington, D.C. or something. And I said, it's almost the end of the year, but please let me have an answer by the end of the year. Within 48 hours, I had an email that just popped up from Russia asking if I would come speak for 1 week to teach lay leaders from all over the country in Ukraine how to develop lay ministries for their people at their churches. And of course, the first reaction is this real? Is this some scam or something? And I said, well, can you give me some people in the U.S. who have gone there and done this before? They did. They happened to be just in Pennsylvania. So I was able to get in touch, verify that everything was true. And I set up to go, flew by myself over there, spent one day in Vienna because I wanted to visit there and the flight could go through there. And ended up in Russia. I had a great time with these people. I was prepared that I would get in and rest, and the next day I'd start speaking, or that night. I got there, and they asked me to start speaking immediately to introduce myself.
Oh.
So I looked, and they didn't know my language. I didn't know their language, except for the interpreter being there and a few people. And I asked for paper and scissors, and a large piece of paper. So I cut this paper and did a little cut and tell story. And everyone could visually see what I was doing and talking about. And it's one that really is about sharing Christ around the world. And they just loved it and decided I was okay. And that was my icebreaker.
That's pretty creative. I would not have been able to do that, Karen. I'd just be sitting there looking at them. In your beautiful book, this is one of 3 that you have published in last year in 2017. This is the one we're specifically talking about today, The Gift of Bread, Recipes for the Heart and the Table. And this is a cookbook devotional, which may be a common phrase, but I'm not familiar with it. Did you create that phrase?
Somewhat, yeah. It's there are some people who do something similar, or they do heartwarming stories with recipes and things, but it's kind of on the edge of what's happening in cookbooks and devotionals at times, because you're getting those hobby devotionals, which we had a wave of about 15 years ago, and some are coming back now, as well as we have the cookbooks that are doing more than just sharing the recipes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I like that, but I like yours particularly, the cover itself. I love your writing. You keep it visually interesting, as well as you break up the content. And the chapters are not long to start with. We'll get into those particulars in just a moment. Michelle Bingston's here. Hey, Michelle. It's good to see you. I hope we're being a good break in your day. Tell us first, though, how did you know? You say in your book, when you realized that God wanted you to become a writer, you went to a retreat. How did you, and he gave you a vision. Can you tell us about that vision?
Yes, he did. I was praying and saying, do you want me to write? I was thinking one book and I'd be out of there. Just a book for families and on family devotions. And I had this vision in which God put out his hand, and there was water flowing over that hand, and in purples and blues, beautiful watercolors. And I said, and he was holding a golden ball, at least I thought it was. And I said, oh, you want me to write the book? And he pulled his hand back and said, no. And I said, oh, you don't want me to write him off the hook? And he said, no. And he puts it forward again. And I said, what do you want? And he said, this is a seed. Plant it and it will produce much. And I said, oh, you want me to be a writer and do a lot of books? And he said, yes, Karen. And I thought, okay. So I went back to my room. I wrote all about this, thinking this is kind of craziness. And the next morning I'm walking to breakfast with my roommate and mentioned the vision, and I had told no one else, and I'd written it down. And I get into breakfast, and I kept thinking, no, I shouldn't sit here. I shouldn't sit. And I finally thought, this is where I'm supposed to sit. And I sat down. At the end of breakfast, the leader asked us to turn over our placemats and said everyone had, the flip side of the placemat was a painting, and they were all unique. And my painting was of my vision with Proverbs 3:4-5 on it. Only God can do that and give us that confirmation. Yes. So then I said, all right, Lord, I'm going to give you 5 years. I don't know anything about writing. I'm a mathematician. I'll do whatever people who know tell me to do, and I'll follow all their directions. And if I don't have anything, even a tiny little thing published in 5 years, I'll know I didn't hear you right. Uh-huh. Within 5 years, I had contracts for 5 books. So I then said, well, I'll keep going till you tell me to stop, and that'll be fine. So I have no particular amount of books in mind that I'm trying to do or anything else. I just want to do what God wants me to do.
Do they come to you? Do you do research? You get a nugget of an idea. Does he lead you? How does that process work, or is it different every time?
It's different every time, and sometimes publishers come to me and I pray and say, Lord, should I be doing this one or not? Mm-hmm. And sometimes I do have an idea and I feel like, oh, this would fit. And sometimes it comes out of my talking to people and other things of saying, what do they need? Because the bread book was the first one, even though it took 22 years to get a publisher. I kept trying variations of what would work to see how I could do that.
It took 22 years to get somebody interested in this beautiful book?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
God's timing. It just wasn't when he wanted me to do it. And perhaps if I had done it, I would have thought earlier that, okay, I'm done. Even when I wrote it, I thought, okay, am I done? And other books came, and it looks, I have one coming out next September 1st, and another one that may be getting contracted soon, and a different one that he put on my heart that I believe he wants me to do. So I just keep doing those things as well as articles.
You have a very broad spectrum of topics that you can discuss and write about and even teach about, don't you?
I do, but the heart of every one of them is family. Everything I do is to strengthen the woman who's the mother, strengthen the family, or build in and equip children with the skills they need to be tomorrow's parents.
Mm. Did you see somebody who emulated that, or was that an assignment, a gift, a calling from Christ to you specifically?
That was a calling, really, just a calling. I grew up in a very functional family. I raised a functional family, and I looked around and realized a lot of people don't even understand the concept of a functional family. And I was gifted enough, or blessed enough to have that, and I could share what that's like with people.
Mm-hmm. And for those who have never experienced it, we need help. We don't understand what it would look like. How can you draw a picture of something you've never seen?
Right, I know. I really believe that that's very true, and that those of us who have been blessed with something that we can share, that's what God wants us to do.
Yes. So that is so wise and so accurate. So now tell me, why do you have a bread plate at the table in your house, and you have had for years and years and years?
Yes, I have for years. I put bread on that plate, and the children help make those plates. You can get these little papers that you put your design on and send it away, and they'll make it into a plate.
Oh.
And so that's a nice thing to be able to do if you're not into ceramics. And if you just have no money, you can just take a paper plate and put a design on it, and that can change up all the time. Mm-hmm. I did that so the children would remember Jesus, the bread of life, is present with us at our meals. Mm-hmm. And when they were young, it was so funny. People would say, "Oh, what a cute little plate." And one of them would jump in and talk all about why we had that plate and why that was so important and special. And it didn't matter if it was in the middle of bone china all over the table. This plate was there.
And how did this now impacted your children? They learned the story. Did they carry that over as a tradition in their homes now as they're adults?
Different ones have different ways of doing things. I can't say if any one of them really does that same thing, mm-hmm. but they all have a way of making sure people know, and the family knows, that God is present with them in what they do.
Nice. So in your book, The Gift of Bread, I like showing books. The Gift of Bread, Recipes from the Heart and the Table. It's gorgeous. I've got a lot of Post-it notes. We will be going back to those and looking at those again. There are 8 sections in the book. 8 sections in the book. There are 60 chapters, but they're very short. 3 pages, 4 pages, and they have such interesting stories in them. Usually you start out a chapter with a personal story, but sometimes it's a story about other people or a different place. Mm-hmm. Then you tie that story seamlessly into a biblical story and add Bible verses and help us understand how this personal everyday story is expressed in the Bible with other people in their life from generations ago, thousands of years ago, and then a specific story. Then you give us a recipe, most of the time, a recipe on some kind of bread, how to make it or how to care for it, or the different elements of how to, the different elements required for making good bread. So tell us more about how you decided to weave those different elements in there.
Right. Well, it all goes back to the heart of why I wanted to write the book, that to me, meals and sharing bread at meals, which helps slow us down as we savor that bread, and something that I grew up with, having homemade bread, was something I wanted to share. And one way was to have those stories so people could see that bread, and having bread at meals and other times to break bread with friends and gifting people with bread could just be a normal part of our faith life, really, and our family life. And then because I've always loved bread, and I've loved that analogy that Jesus gave us when he said, "I am the bread of life," I always delved into the Bible and looked at all these scriptures on bread, and that just kind of interwove together throughout my life. And that's the heart of what I wanted to share, as well as the recipes that I've collected from great-grandmothers and grandmothers and other relatives and friends to put in there, and tips on making bread, as well as the secrets of when things don't work out, what you can do to make sure it will work out in the future.
I picture you in the kitchen, surrounded by women at any time of your life, surrounded by women, and you're baking together and chit-chatting together, little kids running around and running in and out the door. Is that an accurate picture?
I would say that has happened a lot of my life from the time I was one of those little children running around and helping to make the bread, or perhaps interfering, thinking I was helping to make the bread, until now. Even the other day when I had family here for a big party Friday night, and some stayed, or two of the boys stayed overnight, and I was making more biscuits the next day because they ate them all up and we were going to have another meal together. So, that's all part of what we do in my family, and they enjoy that, and it's so much fun.
And it's fun to be in the middle, the conduit. You have wonderful memories of people long gone, baking bread with them, telling stories with them as you were in the kitchen, and now knowing that has not only passed to your own children but to your grandchildren. That must warm your heart very much, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. Anytime. Even my sister-in-law, Joyce, the other day when she came, she arrived with homemade banana bread to add to the table, and I had biscuits, and it just blended together, and everybody liked that. Those who had biscuits for dinner and didn't have both had banana bread as part of their dessert with fruit and cookies. Yeah. So, and my brother had just that day, I received a package in the mail. He'd sent 3 different types of specialty jellies, so we opened them up to go with the bread and the biscuits. And it's as though the family, even if they weren't there, were part of what we were doing and celebrating.
Yes. Not everyone has that kind of heritage, so it's really not only nice that you have it and you have it for your personal use, but you draw upon it in your creativity and help other people vicariously experience it. Not everybody either can do that or does do that. So hats off to you, and thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. And yeah, this week is one of those weeks that I'll be making bread to gift my neighbors.
Didn't you say that you usually put a card in your book? Didn't you say that you usually put a card with the bread?
Yes, I have my Christmas cards. I like to put a card when I gift them with bread to, a Christmas card that I've picked out specially that year to reflect the season and the reason for Christmas. And I make the bread in wreath shapes and heart shapes, so that are actually candy canes put together, and tree shapes and things like that. And they're decorated with, icing, because it's more like a coffee cake bread, with little candied fruit, cherries on it and things. So it's really just a nice thing. But not that I don't gift some of my neighbors with bread other times during the year, because I'm one of those people that does that. And if I knock next door and the boys answer, they're just really happy to see me. They just got bread.
Here, here.
So they're very friendly boys, because
yeah. And
they may be teens, but they know a grandma who makes bread.
That's right. That is exactly right. When you were looking at and deciding, choosing which stories and which Bible verses, and then which biblical stories, it sounds like just a moment ago that the Bible verses that you selected, did you select them first, and then they drove the personal stories that you shared?
It is a combination. I do a spreadsheet for every book. So I have, in this case, I had a column of the stories, a column of the scriptures, a column of the recipes, and I would put those all in, and then I started matching up what went into each row to put that together. And so it's very easy for me to visualize my whole book by using a spreadsheet.
But that makes complete sense for a mathematician, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. I never have understood an outline in my life. I don't do the table of contents till after I've done the spreadsheet, and I use that to figure out a table of contents, because I don't know how to do it otherwise.
We each play to our strengths, don't we?
Yes, we do.
And he shows us how to do that as he gives us assignments. Janelle Wood is here. Hey, Janelle. So good to see you, as always. So I had a couple of examples here, and there's so many, 80 chapters. Did I say that? 80?
60.
I had it right the first time. Thank you.
Yes.
60 chapters. I liked everything that I read, and I pulled out 3 consecutive chapters, something from each of those 3 consecutive chapters. For example, this is the longest example that I have, chapter 30, Bread for Angels. Tell us about the man who helped your family after Hurricane Andrew, please.
Oh, yes. Wow, that was an interesting time. With Hurricane Andrew, we had $99,000 in damage. This is 26 and a half years ago. I can't equate it to what it would be in today's dollars. And that Sunday before the hurricane, which was really like, what, a day or two before, we met someone new in church that sat behind us, introduced ourselves, chatted, found out that he lived kitty corner across from us in apartments with his wife, and that was all nice and good. And we said, you know, the hurricane's coming. If something happens, let us know. We're right there. Well, he came over after the hurricane. My husband was actually on military orders and was not home at that point. Mm-hmm. He was up in New England, and I just had my 5 children to help me, including the 2-year-old. So that's okay. He helped. I put boat shoes on him. I opened the window of the sunken living room and gave him a bucket and had him bailing it out. He had blast splashing water everywhere, including out the window. This man came over. He showed up that day, and I should back up. Just a day before the hurricane came, when we started knowing it was coming, I said to my daughters, I couldn't get bread, just make bread. So they took the recipe. They made 4 loaves of whole wheat bread from my book. That what's in there now, that same recipe I've been doing for more than 4 decades. And this man showed up, and he started cleaning the debris off the driveway with the children. It was so great to have him there because he could pick up the bigger pieces and everything else. And right afterwards, I heard those apartments were condemned. I never saw him again in my life. It's as though God sent that angel, had my husband meet him, and he came, and all I could do was share bread with him, which it's funny because Gideon, you know, gave bread to the angel that came, and he took a loaf of bread back with him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's the chapter. You've got leaven from the Lord, which is the Judges 6:21, the Bible story about Gideon threshing wheat, and then leaven from the oven, which is another section that's in almost every chapter, and that's a recipe. And the particular recipe that you chose was, do you remember? Toasted angel.
Oh, the angel bread dessert. Yes, making your toast into the shape of an angel and putting a little evaporated milk and coconut on it is a special treat for your children. That very angelic sort of treat. It reminds you of angel food cake in ways. So yes, that was a fun thing, and not that the hurricane was fun, but making that particular dessert bread is fun, and having him show up was such a blessing to us.
Yeah. Yes, yes. And then you blessed him. And this is going on. This is the normal course of your life. And your families before you, yours, and your children's and grandchildren's.
Yes, yes. No, it's no wonder that my grandparents had the only restaurant in town. Always cooking.
Oh.
And Grandma at home, I would always be helping her cook.
But that was for pleasure or for the restaurant? Or both?
Little of both.
Mm-hmm.
And often not always just pleasure. Well, I guess it was her pleasure because she was always making at least 2 loaves of bread. And when I was a little girl and said, why do you always make at least 2 loaves of bread? She said, because there's always someone who needs a loaf of bread. And she showed me a little calendar she kept in her purse where she circled a month and 6 months later for anyone who passed away to bring bread to those families both times when people had forgotten them and weren't, you know, and they were still in grief. And as well as if someone new moved in, it was, oh, come on with me. We're going to go deliver bread. We have a new neighbor 3 miles away, but, you know, it's a new neighbor.
It looks to me that this book, in addition to an individual, that this would be so good for a grandparent who has grandchildren visiting or staying nearby, living nearby, that excuse me, a grandmother could tell the story.
Yes, and I do that with my grandchildren. My granddaughter Lily only lives a few miles away, but she's always like making bread with me. And she said, I love those little special Bible connections you have with everything, Grandma. She was just telling me that when we were decorating here for Christmas, and she and another granddaughter came to do that. And my grandchildren in Miami, whether they're here or I'm there, they like to do some cooking with me too.
One of the light wheat, a lot of the recipes that you share are recipes that children would enjoy making and enjoy eating. Lightweight, excuse me, I didn't say that correctly. Light wheat teddy bear bread.
Oh. Yes, that's a fun one because you get to shape it. You know, you get to, it's wheat and whole wheat and white wheat, so that you have those children learning to have it a little bit more wholesome if they don't yet like whole wheat bread. My family were big on whole wheat bread and whole grain breads. And you make that bread and you shape it, whether you're doing a turtle or a teddy bear or even an alligator, whatever you want to make, because I'm in Florida, so we have some animals there. They may say, let's make it this way. Okay, let's do that.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Janet McHenry's here. Janelle Wood says, I don't usually enjoy baking, but you're making it sound so loving and special. I may have to bake something today.
Well, I hope you do, because it's really, to me, just such a pleasure in life, and it's a pleasure to share the bread, and it's my joy to gift people with bread and just leave them with a little taste of, the Lord, and blessing and knowing a little bit about the Lord, who is our strength and who is the bread of life.
You not only tie the personal story in with the biblical story, but you just do it so seamlessly. You weave them so naturally together that if someone was not a Christian or didn't have any even understand that there was such a thing as Christianity, if they were too young or too disinterested, they could enjoy what you've written without ever realizing that they've just heard a biblical story. Now, the Bible verses are there if they want to avail themselves of them. But if somebody's reading it or sharing it, then that wouldn't have to be a part of the conversation. But it's every part that's there is valuable, and it weaves a great picture together, doesn't it?
It does, yes. And I would say that an atheist might not like the book, so might leave an impression with them. But there's no denying when you read the book that I do love the Lord.
Yes. One of the reasons that I've always enjoyed talking with you is that you don't beat anybody over the head. I've never seen you beat anybody over the head. You just are there, and every chance that you get, you bring him up in a natural way. You know him, he knows you. You have a friendship, a relationship. It's long-standing. You've seen him work in your life and in other people's lives. So there's no need to be, one of these.
Right. Yes, if it comes up naturally, it just comes out of my heart, and I don't even try to do that. My husband did the same thing. I can remember when people would sneeze, and he would sneeze, and people would say, God bless you. He'd look at them and say, he has, and I hope he's blessed you too.
Oh!
And that would launch conversations like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, I like that. I've never heard that before.
Just a gentle response, that
yes.
They brought it up, he didn't.
And chapter 32 opens up with your husband, the story of your husband lay dying from breast cancer and wondering, was there any reason for me to be here? And that very day, God gifted him with an answer, didn't he?
Yes, he did. When we were together and he said that to me, and I just said, Jim, you've done so much immediately. I heard a beep of the email, and I thought, well, let me just check this. And I looked, and I couldn't believe that one of his classmates he had not been in touch with for over 3 decades said, Jim, I wanted to send you this, and I've wanted to say something to you for years, but I have to do it now. That years ago, when a few of the classmates were in training at the base where you were stationed, you had us over for dinner, and you slipped your napkin on your lap, and just as easily you slipped into a prayer from the heart. And I couldn't get that prayer out of my mind for the next 2 weeks, so I finally had to start praying with my family, and it changed our lives.
And he told Jim the very day that he needed to hear that.
Yes, he did. I said, Jim, you have no idea if he wrote this, how many other people you have touched in little ways that made a big impact. And I said, that's where God knows it, and we don't have to know all those little things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the man was referencing, the friend was referencing the hospitality. Again, coming back to hospitality, being at your home and enjoying food and fellowship.
Exactly. And we always had an open door to have people over. We had lots of teens come through the door. In the years our children were teens.
Mm-hmm. And you took care of the cadets?
Oh, yes. The cadets at the Coast Guard Academy, the midshipmen at the Naval Academy. We had them over a lot, and we brought bread to the meetings with them, the Bible studies, and actually Naval Academy. I brought dinner plus bread, but the bread was what they looked forward to every week. It just said it made their week to have that homemade bread.
It would make my week to have homemade bread. I would be standing at the door with a thank you note, and I would go to get it if I needed to pick it up. I would go to drive to get it, and I don't drive very much anymore. The last story that I wanted to touch on was chapter 33, and we won't go into it in detail, but again, if it's not a personal story, it's a story about someone else. And this was a story so sweet and touching. It opens with a story of World War II orphans who couldn't sleep without a slice of bread to hold.
Right.
So tender. So
yes.
tender.
Yes, and it was so true, and I've read it in a few places. I think there may even be a children's book about it, that they needed that comfort of bread. It's sort of like our needing the comfort of Christ with us all the time, and the bread of life. So I just was so touched when I had read about that I did include it in the book, because to me it goes back to the heart of why bread can be so important to us, and that the bread they kept, even if it got stale, they could still nibble on it and eat it, that it was still good for them. So, it was just a really great story, and something that those orphans needed, and it brought them through hard times.
Represented their home, didn't it?
Yes.
Going back to our home and our family.
Exactly. It goes back to our roots, when we were nourished by our parents and they served us bread.
Well, let's talk about articles. You had mentioned that you write articles, just a few, over 700 articles. But I wanted to highlight, before we get to the part where you're sharing about how you go about doing it and connecting and so forth, I wanted to share 2 examples that are right here upon us. Very recent. Yesterday, in the blog, Edie Melson's blog, The Right Conversation, you had a post published, and it was, okay, this one surprised me. I don't even see the title now. Where was the title? How to
marketing poetry?
Thank you. Yes. I've got all the information, but I erased the title accidentally. I did not know that you knew about poetry and marketing. I know that you know everything about marketing.
Well, I do have a book that's titled 102 Wiggly Rhymes and Rhythms.
Yes.
Bible rhymes and rhythms. So that is all poetry, a rhyme and song for children.
To me, it's not the same. I didn't make the connection. One, selling your poetry or getting, marketing your poetry. I pictured an adult and not the child, but I see the connection. And you had great ideas in that. And readers, I've got the links for both of the articles that we're going to talk about today, as well as all of Karen's links. Her Facebook author page, her Amazon author page, and so forth. There's a lot of links there because she's a very, very busy lady. A couple of things I wanted to share to help people see, not taking away from the article, but I wanted people to see just 3. I randomly pulled 3 ideas. Create sellable materials to accompany your book, such as greeting cards, message cards, and wall hangings. Number 2, stage your poems for an art show or readings. Number 3, sell them at your book table. Now, only one of those I think would be in a normal, thought process, and you've got many more there, and it shows your creativity and your marketing skills, and that's just for poems.
Yes. Well, I think that there are different ways to market them. We need to think outside the box. So if there are poems that resonate from certain books, why not make that into a greeting card? Especially if, say, your poetry is on grief or your poetry is on the family. Why not make that as a greeting card people can give to someone, whether it's a grief poem on sympathy to send out to people, or it's a poem to just help a family that's struggling, that just reminds them of being together. And, you can make those into little cards, wall hangings, anything, as I said, just so that they become a gift that has your words in poetic form.
Mm-hmm. And that would feed you as well as the poet. Somebody wants what I've created. Somebody's using this to make their house more beautiful, or to warm their heart, or to use as a gift to someone that they care about. That's totally different than it's sitting on a computer and you're not sharing it because you don't know who wants it.
Right, yes. Yes, it is, and it's just another way of doing things. And I just think that we need to not just market in those different ways, but help people realize poetry and the gift of words can be something we share with other people. That so often we're doing these quick texts and everything else, and we don't take time to savor words. Poetry helps us do that.
That's well said. I haven't thought about that, but you're exactly right. That's spot on. Another article that was just also just published, I couldn't get a date on it, was in Inspiration Ministries, When Christmas Invaded a War. That's a compelling story, for goodness sakes.
Yes, and that just came out on last Monday, the 10th, I believe. I was just so blown away when I read about that as I researched my book, Stories of Faith and Courage on the Home Front, and used a small portion of what became the bigger article now of what happened in 100 years ago this Christmas at the end of World War I, in which for 6 months Americans on the home front kept it out of the news. The media did not put it in. Organizations like the Y and the Red Cross put together a huge effort to bring Christmas to the soldiers around the world, wherever they were stationed, to American soldiers. It overflowed to the British soldiers. It overflowed to what they did for the people in Paris and other areas of France. And it was just an amazing story that I just loved seeing that. And it really brought the heart of Christmas back to the people who were weary from war at the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you collected that. Did you share that in your book, or did you collect it?
It's in the book, but there was more that I researched than I could write in a 400-word devotional. That's why the article became longer than what was excerpted from the book itself. But and there are, of course, with each story in the book, there are endnotes of the research of where it came from, so people can look that up, because I usually used quotes from somewhere within each story to give the authenticity of where it came from and to give that voice of that time period. And so when Craig, the editor, was looking for some articles, I said, I have such a wonderful one. It's 100 years. This is the year to do it. He said, yes, let's do that. And I expanded that and made the article, and he actually put an opening paragraph in front of it saying, let's introduce it a little differently to our readers, because it's a newer website, newer online magazine, so I'm not as familiar with it, and he knew how his readers wanted to be drawn into a story. So that was great. Listen to your editors. They can just add so much to whatever you are doing. And that is one good thing to do. But I am so happy that they put that in, because I think we should look back to the past. And the families in New York brought those soldiers home. There were 10,000 soldiers in New York City. They woke up with stockings that included theater tickets, restaurant tickets, and invitations to people's homes for meals, where I'm sure they also got bread with their meals.
Yes.
And probably breads from many countries, because of the people that were living in New York that came, the immigrants from so many countries.
They put stockings on the soldiers. They were on the bed frames of the soldiers around the world who were just in the hospitals. Just a massive undertaking. I'm not sure it could be possible today with social media and technology.
Right. We would never keep it secret.
Yeah,
there are things certainly that different organizations help do for our soldiers around the world. It's just amazing to look back and find out what was done back then.
It was huge. And I noticed the bio that you offered on both. It was the same basic information, but then you flavored it, just like we would flavor our resume if we wanted to have a job as a mathematician or a biochemical engineer. We'd flavor that so that it would fit the job opening. And it's the same way with your articles. In one, you highlight in both you highlight your writing and so forth, but you bring it home so that reader of that online magazine, blog post understands this is why this lady is in this particular spot today. And that's important, to shape it to fit the occasion, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. When you are pitching your articles, whether you're building a body of work and you don't have a book yet, or whether you're promoting a book, you should be looking at can you connect to those readers and let them know who you are and what you are doing, and wrap that up, tie it together kind of like with a bow. And the bow is the packaging of how it connects for your marketing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Don't make them work for it, because they won't.
Right, yes, yeah. Because if they like what they read, they may want to know more about you, but they may want to know more about that topic within what you're doing, or how to connect to you and find you.
Mm-hmm. And you have got, let's see, more than 400, excuse me, I keep trying to use the wrong number, 700 articles in more than 60 publications. Now, you didn't do that last year alone. How long have you been doing this?
No, I've been writing for 25 years, and so I've been doing articles for many years, and I did articles for a number of years before I actually did books. And even now, that in the past 2 months, I've had 10 new articles released and published somewhere.
That blows my mind. That's it's not just the talent required, and you have, again, broad topics, so you can talk intelligently and share stories across many, many topics. Yet you, my thought just completely went by, just completely went like that. But so I'm going. Maybe it'll come back. I'm going to stop talking. Did you start doing the articles before you knew God wanted you to write books, or was your master plan to start with articles and move into books?
As soon as God called me to write, I don't think I thought about what I was doing other than maybe one book. I went to a writer's conference, and I said, I'll listen to whatever. And so I went to this conference where they said, you should start with articles, and this is what you should do, and this is what you should do. And I thought, okay. And they said, and here's all these freebies to look at. At that time, there were more print magazines that you had at conferences than you might find now. And here's the Writer's Market Guide. You should get the Christian Writer's Market Guide. So I bought that. I took home these freebies, and I looked at things and said, I could do that. And I started looking through the article section of the book, the Market Guide. But I tell you, I took it and I read 5 minutes every night, cover to cover, to get through it, to find out what it said, because I didn't know the industry, but that taught me about the industry. And anytime I found a magazine that I thought, oh, I could write for that, I could do that, I would dog ear like you've done with my book there, with little Post-it notes and things, and go back to those and say, what should I do? And they said, you should be submitting at least one thing every month. And I thought, all right, I'll submit at least one thing every month. So the 15th of the month, I'd say, all right, Lord, what's almost done that I could finish up and submit? And if I got that done and I had time, I'd submit something else. Well, 3 months after that conference, I got my first acceptance. And I actually, because I kept working that system, and I had another friend who walked with me and was a published author, who said she subscribed to the lightning method of writing. Do you know that lightning method?
No, I don't. Please tell me. Or I might have heard it and I don't know what's called that.
If you have enough lightning rods out somewhere, lightning's bound to strike. So she thought you should keep at least 7 things out at a time. So I thought, let me combine these 2 things, and I kept things out. Well, I had, once that first acceptance came in, I had 100 months in a row that I kept track of, that I had something accepted every month, which was a lot. You know, that's a lot of years of writing. And I still try to keep things going. But after that 100 months, I was doing columns and things, so I had regular writing that I knew was being accepted.
I don't know if we'll get to it or not, but if we do, I don't want to shortchange the promise that we've made for this program. But at the same time, if we get a chance, I'd like to know more about how you were able to have the opportunity to write a regular column, if we have time to talk about that.
Okay.
Excuse me. So that's the lightning rod method of publication. Excuse me. Let's see. The bio we talked about. So here's what I wanted to say earlier, was that your broad strokes that you have and those breadth of topics that you can talk about, still you either bring it directly or indirectly home to your current writing or past writing, because you can keep marketing books as long as they're available to purchase, right?
Exactly, yes, and I do that. And when I'm looking at magazines and thinking I could write for this, I always think, what should I write for that magazine that's going to reflect what my body of work is about, or what a specific book is about that I can connect to it. You know, we want to stay in what we consider our brand.
Yes. For those who aren't familiar with that concept, can you explain that, why that's so important? It's such a time saver.
Yes, a brand is just like Nike, Campbell's, anything else. It's how people, when they hear that name, they think of you. So when they think of Karen Whiting, besides my saying, when you think of Whiting, think of writing, I want them to be thinking of, what do I write about? That I write about family. Editors know that, so when they're looking for someone who can do something for the family, they will often come to me or my agent. When people pick up something, hopefully they see it and they'll be touched that, oh, there's going to be something that's the heart of family when I am using this book.
Yes.
That it will help. Even though I wrote those military articles, the book is Faith and Courage on the Home Front. So it's back to the home and the family.
And once you get, it's like anything else, isn't it? That once you get familiar with the concept, then it's just a question of refining it to best fit your needs and the recipient's needs. And you've got a system, even if it's only in your mind. You understand the concept and you can roll them out.
Yes. And so I have a tagline, Growing Tomorrow's Wholesome Families Today. Because I write for children so they will be tomorrow's parents. I write for the parents so that their family can be more wholesome and functional, you might say. And wholesome ties into the whole bread concept.
And then we're in the loop, aren't we? We're in the loop. I have heard for 12, 14 years, and you have more years in the field than I do, and you have been more productive, effective communicator than I have been. But I have always rejected the idea of magazine articles. And it's embarrassing to tell you that I have never submitted a magazine article. I should know better. However, I'm turning over a new leaf, Karen. In the year 2019, I will be submitting articles.
Well, good. I love doing it. For a couple of years, I was so busy with books, I didn't write many. And this fall, I said, oh, what a breath of fresh air. I've handed in a book. I don't have another book because I tried to slow down on books to give me room to go back to those articles. And I do think the articles help promote me and my books better than anything else I do. So it was just really refreshing. I let 3 editors know that I was going to be, 3 magazine editors know I was going to be back into writing articles, and I immediately got assigned. As well as while I was at a few conferences, I was intentional about saying I want to write some more articles, and I talked with them and pitched to them and got assignments from there. And so, that just brought up where, as I said, by the end of this year, I had quite a few releasing.
And that's because you built your foundation. It was solid, and it's been consistent, stable these years.
Yes. People, they look for someone who's consistent and will get that work in on time. It is the magazine. I can't tell you how crucial it is to get to the printer to have all those articles in on time and know that they're going to get quality, that they're not going to have to spend hours editing it or send it back to you to do that. And I've had a few sent back because I went through a process to become a writer with Focus on the Family when they had their parenting magazines. And there was one time that an editor was rather ambiguous, and I took it one way and she meant it a different way. I said, and she says, this isn't even what I wanted. I said, well, this is what you wrote, but tell me what you want. This is how I interpret it. And she said, well, this is what I want. So I redid the article quickly and sent it, and she said, that's what I wanted. But I found out her boss said, you often do these things so ambiguous. I'm not sure how your writers know what to do.
Yes. So
it was an interesting circle of talking about that and making sure that I understood. And I usually try to ask when I think I'm not taking it the right way, but I was just really thought I knew what she wanted that time.
But you were talented enough to make it still work. And there are a lot of people who are writers. Janet McHenry has a question. I'm going to get to that in just 1 second, Janet. There are a lot of writers who think, I only know this one thing. But that is not true, is it?
Not really, because you probably know a lot about that one thing that goes in many directions. I have a friend, and her whole thing is helping people get organized. But that goes into the office and organizing their desk. It goes into the home and helps their children. It's also finding out what is the emotional basis for people who are really disorganized or even hoarders. So she knows a lot more she can write about, even though she considers, and that's Sandra Felton, she considers herself a one-note writer.
Again, once you start, it starts coming to you. The ideas spring up, don't they?
Yes, they do.
And they come from the Holy Spirit, and He helps us say, oh, there's the connection. Oh, I didn't even see that. Once you see that, then you're building that tree, and the next thing you know, you got leaves and branches every which way. Let me see. Janet says, it's interesting that magazines are promoted in the digital age. That's Janet Berkey. Excuse me, Janet. Janet McHenry says, for what magazines does Karen write, and how did she find out about them and their particular needs? Thank you, Janet. And Janet Berkey, we'll come back to you in just a moment.
I write for Leading Heart magazine with ASA, with Advanced Writers Speakers Association. And when that was getting started, I actually was helping Linda Evans find an editor she chose an editor I had worked with on a couple other magazines. So that editor immediately said, you need to do a column. I had a cousin who was an editor up in Connecticut for a denominational newspaper. She asked me to write for that paper, and I became a columnist for that. And that paper, they switched to a newsletter about 2 years ago after I wrote for them for a dozen years as a paper. And then I also write for the Kids Arc, which is a quarterly children's magazine. I met the people at a conference. I write for Crosswalk because a lot of friends had written for Crosswalk. I asked one, how did you get in? She told me and gave me the contact for the editor. I wrote to the editor, pitched an idea, and in their process, your first article is free. After that, they start paying you.
Oh.
And they even put you on a list to give you assignments in a different way. They do it like Focus used to do. They'll send out their wish list of lots of articles under categories and say, choose two. The first one is do this. The second one will be do this. Let me know what you'd like to do, and the first one I hear from will get that article assignment. Mm-hmm. And so I did 2 in November, 2 in December. And although if you don't see one that you want or it's already taken, you're also free to pitch your own ideas. So in the midst of that, one of them was my own idea. And that was a Thanksgiving article. I didn't get either of the Thanksgiving. I was a day late, $1 short, you might say. And she said, but what else would you like to write? And I said, well, the main thing I'd really like to have us look at the Thanksgiving feasts in the Bible that people had. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, we haven't done that. So I did 10 Thanksgiving feasts in the Bible.
Wow.
Thanksgiving, and had to hone it down and just choose 10 out of many that are really there. Mm-hmm. But each one I chose for a different way that related to why we should be thankful, as to each one had an aspect they were thankful about.
Mm-hmm. So am I correct in assuming that you don't really contact people, for the most part, you don't contact people cold anymore? You have a reputation. People know about you in the field. Or are you still doing that every once in a while, knocking on a door you haven't?
No, I will do both. I will contact people cold for articles that I want to do or at a conference. So the Columbia magazine, I thought I maybe had it here, that I just wrote a bread article. The Gift of Bread is the name of the article for their Christmas feature article. I met Gloria Hatcher, the editor, at the Blue Ridge Conference in May, and I mentioned what I did, and we said, okay, let's do it. I said, I really can't do it till the fall, and she said that'd be good. And when I sent it in, she decided it'd be perfect for the Christmas magazine and issue. So that's print one. But I will also still look at the Writer's Market Guide and think, I want to write this or that. Let me see who might want that and where it could fit, and then I'll write to that editor. And there are times that I've written to an editor to say, I would like to be one of your writers. I really think I could fit well. Here's links to a few of the things I've done. Let me know what you think. Uh-huh. And I've done that in the past, and with magazines that aren't in print now, but that I wrote for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So multiple approaches, and you get multiple results, but overall, they're positive.
Yes. I mean, there's times it'll say it doesn't fit, or we've just done that topic, and they'll usually say, but, pitch some others to me. It's not usually a closed door.
Okay. And if they're engaging with you, that's a good sign, isn't it?
Yes, it is. There's only one that I tried to do in that magazine's not around anymore, that when I sent in an article, because I'd met the editor, and he wanted me to change it to what was not going to be true any longer. He wanted me to, and it was for parents. I thought, I can't do that. It's not going to work with my own integrity, and it's not going to work with this. So I didn't pursue doing others for that magazine. Sometimes you find you just don't fit.
Yeah, yeah.
And I couldn't, and maybe he had in his mind a way I could slant it that would fit, where it wouldn't change it so much that it wasn't true anymore, but I couldn't see that.
Okay. That's helpful information. Just because we have a conversation, nobody's obligated to continue the relationship. It's like any other business arrangement.
Right, and it's always on speculation when you send in those things, unless you're actually under assignment. But even under assignment, if it's doesn't end up being what they want, they can come back to you, ask you to change it. They can give you a kill fee if they've already promised a fee and you have some sort of contract. This type of thing can be done. Things are always negotiable, aren't they?
Yes. Uh, but that goes back to your creativity, because you see openings that other people would say, here, yes or no, and they'd be finished.
Yes, and I can tell you one. Do we have time?
Yes, yes. I want to get to Janet's. Janet, we're coming to you.
All right. I met with the marketing people that focus on Tyndale went before the release of the 1 year My Princess Devotions for preschool girls, and they were talking about what I could do to market. And I said, well, I'm going to market to a teen magazine. They said, to a teen magazine? This is preschool book. I said, oh. I said, who do those little girls look up to? They look up to their big sisters, to their babysitters, to the teens they see and they want to be. I'm going to pitch an article for Susie magazine was in print that time. She had formerly been the editor of Brio, on mentoring young girls and becoming a mentor. And it became a big feature article, and they used an excerpt from the book.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you can really think outside the box and think, who's my secondary audience that might be an influencer to have people buy that book for the right audience? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did there.
I know a lot of writers, but the ones that I know, you're one of or the most creative at thinking outside the box. And people tell us that, but then we don't know how to do it naturally, so we're still stuck. We have the information, but you give us examples, you give us stories, you tell us the real world, how the real world works.
Right, and that's why I've become a writing coach, so I can help people and I can give them those ideas and share with them and listen to what is on their heart to help them open up and release the creativity they don't realize is in there.
I think that I know that you're a great marketing and writing coach, and that link, that's actually on your website, correct?
Yes.
So once they get to your website, they've got that, they'll go to the menu bar.
Yes.
And find that tab. Good. Excuse me. Janet McHenry has a follow-up before we get to Janet Berkey. McHenry says, I'm truly not fishing. I'm writing 2 articles on assignment for Focus right now. Just turn them both in. She was just curious.
Well, and Janet's been a writer, and she's been around for a long time. I really admire the things she's done and the struggle she's gone through while she has continued to write. So it's someone else people should look up, and you've probably had her on your show.
Yes, I have. I admire her as well. Thank you for that answer. Janet Berkey says, it's interesting that magazines are promoted in the digital age. I haven't bought a magazine in forever and guess I need to get back more into the writing world and find out what is going on.
Yes, and there are the online magazines that we should be reading as well as the print ones. And I think it's good to sit back and relax with a magazine that you enjoy, to gift children with magazines at Christmas and birthday times also, so that they can be readers and find the joy of opening the pages of a magazine and getting that in the mail. Don't they love mail? And they don't get as much anymore.
Yes, absolutely. Janet McHenry says, thanks so much, Karen. So what is your goal now? Is it just, have you created a machine that's running on its own for the most part? Or do you still have a quota that so many a month, you're going to submit so many a month?
It's sort of going on its own a little bit more than trying to create things, because I do have ones that I just generally do because of who I write for. And then things like, when you're writing for Crosswalk and they send out that list, you easily get that and can think, do I want to? Or that month you might say, I really can't even handle anything else. And I just write a note to the editor, I'm going to skip this month entirely because this is going on or whatever. And because I like to keep in communication. If they don't hear from you in a while, they'll think, she fell off the face of the earth. Does she even want to write anymore? Is she avoiding me? Did something go wrong? And it's always important to be in touch and communicate with editors.
That's great. That's great. So before we close out, let me ask you one last question, and we may have others before I get finished with my question. Do publishers and all those who would submit both articles and books to, okay, all those people, do they value a track record of online magazine articles being published as much as a print magazine article to be published?
Oh, I think so. They still, either way, they know the deadline has to be met, that it has to be the right quality of writing. And so articles are articles in wherever they're at. Content is important. The content is still king. Communication and being someone they can depend on is important to those editors.
That makes this just, again, a normal business relationship. Everybody's professional. Everybody does what they said they were going to do and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And you start that whole process by attending writers' conferences. Most of the time you're a faculty member, but you meet people and you take advantage of the opportunities that are there in front of you, right?
I do. Well, and I asked the Lord what I should be doing. I can remember going to one of my first ones, and I put together an index card for each editor who was going to be there that I might want to talk to, and then I'd pull that out. So at lunch one day, I pulled out one for an editor of a family magazine, and I thought, okay, I've got all these great ideas, and I sat there. I thought, well, let me find out who they are, and I asked him a few questions, and I said, so what are you looking for? And he said, I can tell you what I'm not looking for. And he named 3 things that shut down all 3 of my ideas. And I said, okay, so what do you want? He says, I want something that makes me laugh. And I said, oh, I've got a good story for you.
There you go.
I told him a story about my husband and I that had him roaring, and he says, I want that article. And I did that article. It was lack of communication skills, actually, and I did that article, and I went to his class and found out he really likes sidebars, so I did a sidebar, the ABCs of communication. I resold that sidebar so many more times than ever reselling the article.
Oh my goodness!
And it became their Christmas article because it happened to involve Saran wrap. It's a very funny story, and I said unwrapping communication skills is the title, so they saved it for their Christmas issue. and within it, I talked about the gift of words. So.
Okay, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. You have helped us so much. Just checking to see if we have anything else going on. I do not see anything, any other comments or questions. You've helped us so much with practical details. And I don't have the Christian Writers Market Guide on my links for you that I've already collected of your links. So I'll add that after the episode.
Right, and the new one is out with a bonus. If you buy the new one, you get the online one for free, which they update every month. So that's a $25 value, I think they said. I may not be right about that. So do look up that link and post it for people, because it's the way to learn the industry. It's the way to find out who publishes what. It's a way to find out about articles. It's a way to find out about conferences and writing groups and everything. So that is important to have.
It's packed with an unbelievable amount of information. It's like a encyclopedia.
Yes, it is. And I still like the print version best, but I like to have the online to be able to quickly look something up when I need it.
I agree with that. I agree with all that. Thank you, Miss Karen Whiting. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and I hope listeners want to write some articles now. They're always needed.
Yes. And for those who don't know, I meant to mention this earlier, Karen's already visited us twice. I've got the links to both of those interviews as well in the resources that I always upload after the episode is over. So thank you for joining us. Thank you again, Miss Whiting. And if you see Karen at a conference, just know that she has 5 billion ideas in her mind. Just tap in and get a few ideas, and you're not going to run her well dry, because it is always being replenished.
Yeah, it's like a popcorn popper that doesn't stop popping. Hard to get to sleep sometimes.
It's very interesting to have a conversation with you, or just hear you're having a conversation with somebody else. So thanks very much for being here, viewers. This has been Marketers on a Mission, episode number 197. How to promote your message and your books by writing articles, with author and international speaker Karen Whiting. Tomorrow, author Ginger Harrington will be with me. She's going to tell us about how to put Pinterest to work for us.
I love Ginger.
Well, we are going to fall in love with her tomorrow as well, and maybe we will fall in love with Pinterest. We'll see. I don't know. You know that we're here every weekday at 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern to serve you, to help you learn the craft of professional writing and speaking from those who are already doing it, because our mission field is online, and online marketing connects us to our audience so that we can tell them, this is who I am, this is where you can find me, this is how I can help you, and these are the results that you can expect, so that their lives will change and their eternity will change. It's a wondrous process, and the Lord has invited us to be a part of it, because He gifted us with the message He wants us to deliver to His people in His name. Even some people who don't even know His name yet, but He wants us to tell them about Him so they can. We love it. Thank you again, Miss Karen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.